You can't be serious, Administrator's Elder. Professor Clara as secondary breathing sacs inflated with indignation, causing her iridescent scales to ripple in shades of agitated purple. Allowing a warrior from a hazardous planet into the Advanced Computational Sciences program at the Galactic Institute of Higher Learning? The administrator's eyes blinked in perfect sequence, a sign of his growing amusement at the situation. His tentacles, usually maintained in a perfect professional coil, swayed slightly as he leaned back in his hover chair. "My dear professor," he chirped, his translator working overtime to convey the mix of authority and entertainment in his voice. "I fail to see why you're so, shall we say, animated about this particular admission." Animated. KH. Landria's tail whipped back and forth, nearly knocking over a priceless crystalline sculpture from the Andromeda Cultural Exchange. "They're from a Class 12 death world. Their planet has," she shuddered dramatically, "weather patterns." Valthrix couldn't suppress a warble of laughter. "Yes, and they also have developed space flight, quantum computing, and somehow managed to turn their deadly dihydrogen monoxide into something they call soft drinks. Fascinating species, really. But their cognitive processing speed is precisely why this will be interesting," Valthrix interrupted, all four eyes now focused intently on the professor. "The human in question, one Orion Drake. Even their names sound dangerous, KH. Landria muttered. ... has passed every entrance exam we've thrown at them, including your infamous impossible probability matrix. That got her attention." Her scales shifted to a shocked shade of white. That's not possible. Even our quantum processors take 3.7 cycles to solve that. They did it in 0.1 cycles. They cheated. We watched them solve it using what they called scratch paper and something termed a number to pencil. Primitive tools. But Valthrix's tentacles formed the gesture for, "What can you do?" The door chime interrupted their discussion, its melodic tones announcing a visitor. Both educators turned KH, Landria somewhat more stiffly to face the entrance. There, filling the doorframe, with what seemed like an impossible amount of physical presence for such a relatively small being, stood Orion Drake. The human's dark skin contrasted beautifully with their silver-white hair, styled in what they would later learn was called an undercut. Their eyes, a striking amber color, scanned the room with an intensity that made KH, Landria's scales ripple involuntarily. "Sorry I'm early," Phoenix said, their voice carrying that peculiar single-tone quality that all humans had. "Mom always said, better to be an hour early than a minute late. Though on Earth, that usually just means you get to wait in traffic instead of being stuck in traffic." Valthrix's translator took a moment to process the idiom, but he gestured welcomingly with his tentacles. Student Blackwood, we were just discussing your, unique qualifications." Phoenix's face contorted into what both aliens recognized from their xenobiology studies as a smile, though this one had an edge of what humans called snark to it. "You mean you were trying to figure out how a monkey with a pencil outperformed your quantum computers?" KH Landria's scales flushed an embarrassed orange eye. "That is, we were merely, it's cool," Phoenix interrupted, pulling out what appeared to be an ancient data tablet, what humans called a notebook, and a writing implement. "I get it. You're not the first to underestimate humans, and you probably won't be the last. But here's the thing about coming from a death world." They paused, that dangerous smile growing wider. "When every day is a challenge to survive, you get really, really good at finding shortcuts." Valthrix's translator actually giggled at that, which made him wonder if he needed to have it checked for personality subroutines. "Now," Phoenix continued, taking a seat without waiting for permission, "another very human trait. I believe I'm here to start my advanced studies in computational sciences. And I've got this fascinating theory about using chaos mathematics to predict weather patterns that I think might just blow your minds." They paused, then added with a wink, "Figuratively speaking, of course. I know how you feel about Earth idioms involving conflict." KH, Landria's scales had settled into a resigned shade of blue-gray. "Very well. But I must warn you, our curriculum is designed for beings with access to quantum processing capabilities. Phoenix held up their pencil, twirling it between their fingers with a dexterity that made both aliens slightly nervous. And I have access to something even better, a human brain that evolved to calculate the trajectory of both prey and predators while running across uneven terrain in variable weather conditions. Trust me, Professor, your quantum computers might be fast, but they've got nothing on for billion years of evolutionary problem solving. Valthrix found themselves leaning forward, genuinely intrigued. And you believe this biological computing power can match our technology? Match it? Phoenix's laugh echoed through the room, causing several nearby crystalline sculptures to resonate sympathetically. With all due respect, Administrator, I'm not here to match anything. I'm here to show you exactly why humans don't just survive on a death world. We thrive there, and maybe, just maybe, teach your computers a thing or two about thinking outside the box. They paused, then added with another one of those dangerous smiles, assuming, of course, that's not to animate a goal for your prestigious institution. K.H. Landria's scales cycled through several colors so quickly it looked like a malfunctioning display panel. Valthrix, on the other hand, found himself making the gesture for deeply amused with all four tentacle groups at once. This was going to be an interesting semester indeed. The quantum processing lab of the Galactic Institute was, by any civilized species standards, a marvel of engineering. Crystalline computing cores pulsed with exotic particles, their ethereal glow casting dancing shadows across the polished osmium walls. To most beings, it was a temple of pure logic and mathematical precision. To Orion Drake, it looked like a disco had gotten intimate with a calculator. And this, Professor Clara, announced with poorly concealed smugness, her scales now a proud gold, is our pride and joy, the Q3000 parallel processing array. It can solve complex astronomical calculations in mere moments, predict quantum state changes across entire star systems, and it looks like a lava lamp having an existential crisis. Phoenix interrupted, squinting at the massive machine. Several nearby student aliens, a mix of tentacled, crystalline, and gaseous beings, made sounds that their translators struggled to convey as either shocked gasps or suppressed laughter. K.H. Landria's scales flickered to an irritated magenta. Student Blackwood, this single processing core contains more computing power than your entire species combined technological. Oh, I don't doubt it's powerful, Phoenix said, pulling out their ever-present notebook and that worryingly primitive pencil. But you know what they say about, it's not the size of the quantum processor, it's how you use it. A crystalline student literally cracked with suppressed mirth, requiring immediate application of emergency sealant. Regardless, K.H. Landria continued, her translator struggling to maintain diplomatic tones. Today's challenge will demonstrate why pure biological computing is ultimately inferior to our technological achievements. The Q3000 will attempt to solve a complex, undimensional probability matrix while simultaneously done. The room went silent. Even the quantum cores seemed to pulse more quietly. Excuse me. K.H. Landria's scales had gone completely white. Phoenix held up their notebook, where a series of calculations and diagrams covered the page in what looked to most aliens like primitive scrawls. The answer: I solved it while you were explaining the test. Want me to walk you through it? That's impossible. The Q3000 hasn't even finished formatting the problem parameters. Yeah, see, that's your first inefficiency right there, Phoenix said, standing and walking to the massive holoscreen, displaying the computer's work in progress. You're treating this like it's a pure mathematics problem, but it's actually more like predicting where a thrown rock will land while running from a hungry bear. The gaseous student made a sound like a confused whoopee cushion. What's a bear? Trust me, you don't want to know, Phoenix grinned. But the point is, when you're doing complex calculations in survival situations, you learn to skip steps. Your brain fills in patterns based on experience and intuition. You don't calculate every variable, you feel the answer. Feel the answer? K.H. Landria's scales were cycling through colors so fast she looked like a malfunctioning traffic signal. Mathematics isn't about feeling, it's about precise methodical. Did you know? Phoenix interrupted again, a habit that was clearly testing the professor's patience, that human children can catch a thrown ball without doing a single conscious calculation. Our brains process trajectory, speed, wind resistance, and dozens of other variables instantly, automatically, and with better accuracy than most computers. They turned to the hollow screen, grabbed a light stylus, and began annotating the computer's calculations with quick, confident strokes. See, here's where you're wasting processing power. Instead of calculating every possible quantum state, you can use pattern recognition to eliminate 99% of the impossible outcomes instantly. It's like how we know a thrown ball won't suddenly start flying upward. We don't need to calculate that possibility because experience tells us it's not worth considering. Advisor Dreff, who had been quietly observing from the back of the lab, floated forward on his hover chair. Fascinating. You're suggesting that biological intuition can serve as a pre-processing filter for complex calculations? Exactly. Phoenix's eyes lit up. Human brains are basically organic quantum computers that have been optimized through millions of years of try this or die scenarios. We don't just process information. We predict into it and imagine solutions based on patterns we might not even consciously recognize. They turn back to their notebook, flipping to a new page. Here, let me show you something really cool. You know how your quantum cores struggle with incorporating chaos theory into their calculations? It's a fundamental limitation of digital systems, one of the tentacled students offered. You can't perfectly predict chaos, but you can surf it, Phoenix said, their pencil flying across the page. Watch this. I'm going to solve your next test before you even input it into the Q3000, and I'm going to do it using something we humans call eyeballing it. K.H. Landria's scales had settled into a confused shade of turquoise. You can't possibly. The answer will be approximately 3.14159 times 1023, plus or minus a negligible quantum variance factor, Phoenix announced, holding up their notebook again. And I got there using nothing but good old-fashioned human pattern recognition and what my calculus teacher used to call disgustingly creative shortcuts. The Q3000 chose that moment to chime, indicating it had finally solved the previous problem. The answer matched Phoenix's exactly, but how? K.H. Landria's translator seemed to be having trouble processing her mix of emotions. Phoenix's smile was somehow both humble and triumphant. Like I said, when every day is a battle for survival, you get really good at finding shortcuts. Now, who wants to learn some human mathematics? I promise it'll blow your minds way more efficiently than your quantum computer. Advisor Dreff made a gesture that his species used to indicate both deep respect and mild terror. I believe, Student Blackwood, that you are about to revolutionize our entire approach to computational theory. Nah, Phoenix said, twirling their pencil again. I'm just going to show you why sometimes the best processor isn't the biggest or the most advanced. It's the one that evolved to dodge predators while simultaneously calculating the best way to catch prey, while also trying to figure out if those berries are edible or if they'll make you hallucinate and dance with purple elephants. What's an elephant? The gaseous student asked again. Another thing you really don't want to meet without doing some quick calculations first, Phoenix laughed. Now, who's ready to learn how to think like a deaf worlder? The room full of alien students, their curiosity thoroughly piqued, leaned forward eagerly. Even K.H. Landria's scales had settled into an intrigued shade of blue. Class was about to get interesting. The news spread through the Galactic Institute faster than a quantum entanglement cascade. Within days, Orion Drake's computational methods had become the most discussed and controversial topic in every faculty lounge, student hub, and research pod. It simply cannot be reliable, insisted Professor Yaxtilian, their crystalline form vibrating with academic indignation as they addressed the packed lecture hall. These shortcuts and gut feelings go against every established principle of actually. Phoenix's voice cut through the murmuring crowd as they strolled in, carrying something that made several alien species danger sensors go haywire. I brought visual aids today. What on earth is that? What is that? A gelatinous student burbled nervously. their translucent form rippling at the sight of the steaming container in Phoenix's hand. This, Phoenix grinned, taking a long sip. This is humanity's secret tactical tool. We call it coffee, triple espresso, specifically. Because if you think human pattern recognition is impressive normally, wait until you see what happens when we're properly caffeinated. Professor Tlara, who had been unusually quiet since the Q300 incident, raised a scaled appendage. Student Blackwood, please tell me you didn't bring a Class 3 stimulant into an academic setting. Class 3? Phoenix laughed. Oh no, Professor. Coffee is way more potent than that. We humans just built up a tolerance over a few thousand years of drinking it to stay alive during predator watches. The entire hall fell silent as this information processed through various translator units. Now then, Phoenix continued, pulling out their notorious notebook. Who's ready to learn about how humans use chaos theory to predict weather patterns? And more importantly, why that same principle can be applied to literally any complex system, including your quantum computing networks. Professor Extillion's crystalline form clouded with confusion. Weather patterns are inherently unpredictable beyond a certain temporal threshold, even our most advanced. Wrong, Phoenix declared cheerfully, taking another sip of coffee. Weather isn't unpredictable. It's just really good at fake-outs. Kind of like that time I had to outthink a pack of wolves that was trying to herd me into a ravine. You fought wolves? A hovering student near the back asked, their anti-grav units flickering with excitement. Fought them? Nah, that would have been suicide. I outsmarted them by predicting their hunting pattern and using it against them. Same principle applies to weather systems, quantum fluctuations, and they paused for dramatic effect. Your entire approach to computational theory. Phoenix strode to the massive holoscreen at the front of the hall, which was currently displaying a complex atmospheric modeling simulation. With their free hand, they began annotating it rapidly. See, you're trying to calculate every possible variable and interaction. That's like trying to count every raindrop in a storm. But what if instead you thought like a predator? Their eyes gleamed with caffeine-enhanced enthusiasm. Look for the patterns, the weaknesses, the moments when chaos becomes predictable. Chaos cannot be predictable, Professor Wixtillion protested. That's literally the definition of ... Tell that to a surfer, Phoenix countered. They don't calculate wave dynamics, they feel them. They don't compute water particle interactions, they ride them. And that's exactly what we're going to do with your quantum computing systems. They drained the last of their coffee and pulled out that infamous pencil. Watch this. I'm going to solve your atmospheric modeling problem using nothing but human intuition. And what my high school track coach called that scary thing you do with patterns. The next 30 minutes left an indelible mark on the history of the Galactic Institute, using what appeared to be completely illogical shortcuts, impossible leaps of inference, and what one student described as mathematics that looks like it was invented by an adrenaline junkie. Phoenix demonstrated a completely new approach to chaos theory. And that's why they concluded, standing back from the holoscreen now covered in their annotations, your quantum computers are actually overthinking everything. They're trying to be perfect when they should be trying to survive. Professor Tlara's scales had shifted to a previously undocumented shade of awestruck cyan. But how can we implement such organic methods into our systems? Phoenix's grin turned positively predatory. That's the best part. You don't need to change your hardware. You just need to teach it to think like it's being chased by a bear. You really need to stop mentioning bears, muttered a nervous crystalline student. Fine, Phoenix conceded. Think of it like this, every problem is a puzzle, but you're not looking for the perfect solution. You're looking for the solution that won't get you eaten. Once you accept that good enough to survive is better than perfect, but too late, everything gets simpler. They pulled out a fresh notebook, their previous one already filled with what looked like mathematical blasphemy to most of the audience. Now, who wants to learn how to make a quantum computer think like a species that evolved throwing rocks at dinner while avoiding becoming dinner for something bigger? Every appendage, tentacle, and sensory organ in the room raised in enthusiasm. Perfect, Phoenix declared, then paused thoughtfully. Oh, and anyone know where I can get more coffee? Teaching xenomathematics really drains the old survival instincts. Advisor Dreth, who had been observing from his usual spot in the back, made a note to have the Institute's fabrication unit start producing this coffee substance immediately. If this was what human computational methods could achieve with just one dose, he couldn't wait to see what would happen with a steady supply. As Phoenix began their next explanation, involving something they called eyeballing it with style, Advisor Dreth couldn't help but notice that even the most skeptical professors were taking notes. The revolution in computational theory had begun, and it was powered by coffee, chaos, and one human's ability to turn survival instincts into mathematical shortcuts. The Galactic Academic Council wasn't used to emergency sessions. In fact, the last time they'd convened unexpectedly was when someone had accidentally taught a hyperspace drive to feel existential dread. But here they were, gathered in their grand crystalline chamber, all because of one coffee-powered human and their mathematical heresy. Order in the council. Chief Administrator Chairman Zinther's bioluminescent patches pulsed with authority. We are here to address the unusual situation at the Institute. Unusual. A counselor composed entirely of quantum probability clouds shimmered in agitation. Student Blackwood's methods have spread to 3 other institutions. They're teaching quantum computers to vibe with the problem. This is madness. Phoenix, sitting calmly in the center of the chamber with their inevitable coffee cup and notebook, raised their hand. Actually, that was a mistranslation. I said they should vibe check the problem. Totally different thing. Not helping. Several counselors chorused in various languages. Advisor Dreth, who had been summoned to explain his role in this academic upheaval, cleared his throat tubes. Honorable Council, if I may, Student Blackwood's methods, while unorthodox, have produced unprecedented results. Their integration of biological heuristics with quantum computing has improved efficiency by 3,000% by teaching computers to trust their gut. Asked a counselor whose species didn't even have guts. More like teaching them to think like they're trying not to die, Phoenix offered helpfully. You'd be amazed how much faster you can solve problems when you frame them in terms of survival. But that's precisely the issue. The quantum probability counselor fluctuated dramatically. You've introduced emotional reasoning into pure mathematics. Phoenix took a long sip of coffee, their eyes twinkling with that dangerous Death Worlder gleam. Okay, how about this? Let's settle it with a challenge. Your best quantum systems against my human intuition. Winner gets to set the new standard for computational theory in the galaxy. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of protests, arguments, and what sounded suspiciously like betting odds being calculated. Silence. Chairman Zinther's bioluminescence nearly blinded several attendees. Student Blackwood, are you suggesting a formal computational duel? Yep, Phoenix grinned, popping the P in a way that made several crystalline beings vibrate nervously. But let's make it interesting. Instead of abstract mathematical problems, let's solve real-world scenarios. You know, the kind of stuff that actually matters. Professor Tlara, who had become something of a reluctant advocate for Phoenix's methods, spoke up from her observation pod. What exactly are you proposing? Phoenix stood, and somehow their small human frame seemed to fill the massive chamber. 3 challenges. First, predict the outcome of a complex dynamic system. Let's say a gas giant's storm patterns. Second, optimize a hyperspace route through a quantum anomaly field. And third, double quotes, they paused dramatically. Solve a problem none of us has seen before, in real time. And what do you expect to prove? The quantum probability counselor wavered skeptically. That sometimes the best computer isn't the one with the most processing power. It's the one that evolved to calculate projectile trajectories while sprinting across uneven terrain in the rain. At night, pursued by something with too many teeth, Phoenix twirled their pencil. You know, basic human stuff. There was a long moment of silence as the council processed this. Finally, Chairman Zinther spoke. And if we accept this challenge, if I win, my methods become part of the standard curriculum. If I lose, Phoenix shrugged, I'll admit that pure logic beats human intuition. And I'll stick to traditional computational methods. The council members exchanged glances, blinks, quantum fluctuations, and various other species-specific expressions of communication. Very well, Chairman Zinther announced. The challenge will take place in one standard cycle. We will assemble our most advanced quantum computing systems. Great, Phoenix interrupted, already scribbling in their notebook. Just one small request. Can we do this early in the morning? That's when the coffee hits different. Professor Clara's scales shifted to a shade of amused resignation. Student Blackwood, are you seriously planning to take on the combined computational power of the galaxy's most advanced AI systems while caffeinated? Of course not, Phoenix replied with a grin that made several counselors' threat assessment modules activate. I'm planning to take them on while highly caffeinated. Trust me, you haven't seen pattern recognition until you've seen a human on their fourth espresso doing theoretical physics. Advisor Dreth made a mental note to have the medical bay on standby. Not for Phoenix, for anyone who might experience cognitive dissonance watching a primate with a pencil outperform quantum supercomputers. As the council chamber cleared, Phoenix remained, making what appeared to be doodles in their notebook, but were actually complex computational frameworks disguised as stick figures running from badly drawn predators. You know, they said to no one in particular, the funny thing is, you all think I'm doing this to prove humans are special or something. But really they looked up at the holographic displays showing the vast computational networks they'd be competing against. I'm just trying to show you that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to stop trying to be perfect and start trying to survive. They closed their notebook with a satisfying snap. Now, who's going to show me where I can get an extra large coffee maker installed? Tomorrow's going to be fun. The cleaning drone that happened to be passing by made a note to request hazard pay for the next day's shift. Something told its basic AI that things were about to get interestingly messy. The day of the challenge arrived with all the subtlety of a supernova. The Institute's grand computing arena was packed with observers from across the galaxy. Crystalline beings refracted light nervously, gaseous entities swirled in excited eddies, and at least 3 different silicon-based species had stress-fractured before the event even began. In one corner stood the combined might of galactic computing, the Q3000, freshly upgraded and linked to quantum cores from 17 different institutions. Its crystalline lattice hummed with barely contained computational power. In the other corner sat Orion Drake, surrounded by empty coffee cups and looking entirely too cheerful for someone about to face off against the most advanced AI systems in known space. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider, Professor Clara? Asked, her scales flickering with concern. The combined processing power you're facing is impressive, but predictable, Phoenix finished, sketching something in their notebook that looked suspiciously like a stick figure surfing on a wave of mathematical symbols. Like I keep saying, it's not about processing power, it's about processing style. Chief Administrator Chairman Zinther floated to the center of the arena, his bioluminescence set to official announcement mode. The first challenge will begin momentarily. Both competitors will attempt to predict the storm patterns of the gas giant Nexus 7 for the next solar cycle. You have double quotes done, Phoenix announced, holding up their notebook. The arena fell so silent you could hear a quantum fluctuation drop. That's impossible, the quantum probability counselor wavered. The computational arrays haven't even finished loading the initial parameters. Yeah, but I looked at the actual storm footage, Phoenix said, pointing to the holographic display of Nexus 7. See that swirl pattern in the upper atmosphere? That's exactly like what happens when you're trying to predict which way a tornado will turn, except, you know, bigger and more gaseous. Once you spot the pattern, the rest is just double quotes. They waggled their fingers dramatically. Death Worlder Intuition. The Q3000 chimed its completion several minutes later. The predictions matched Phoenix's almost exactly. Fascinating, Advisor Dreth mused. But surely the second challenge, plotting a safe hyperspace route through a quantum anomaly field, will require more precise calculations. Phoenix was already drawing again, their pencil moving with caffeine-enhanced speed. You mean like calculating the safest path through a field of predators, while also considering terrain hazards and possible escape routes? Because let me tell you about this one time I had to cross a valley full of rattlesnakes during earthquake season. 20 minutes later, the quantum computing array was still processing possibilities, while Phoenix demonstrated their route using what appeared to be an interpretive dance with their pencil. See, if you think of quantum anomalies like really spicy probability snakes, they explain to the increasingly bewildered audience. Then plotting a course is just a matter of predicting where they don't want you to go and doing the opposite. Basic prey behavior analysis, really. When the computers finally finished, their optimal route differed from Phoenix's by only 0.03%, and several quantum physicists reluctantly admitted the human's path had more style. And now, Chairman Zinther announced, his bioluminescence tinged with excitement, the final challenge, a problem none of us has seen before, to be revealed now. The main holoscreen flickered to life, displaying a simulation of a complex system involving multiple intersecting reality planes. Non-Euclidean geometry. Oh, fun, Phoenix exclaimed, pulling out a fresh notebook. This is just like trying to predict where a squirrel will jump while it's stealing your lunch during a lightning storm. You have to account for chaos within chaos, with a dash of, "Why is this happening to me?" thrown in. The audience watched in fascinated horror as Phoenix began solving the problem using what they claimed was the same math that lets us catch a ball without calculating parabolas, except spicier. Halfway through their solution, they paused. "Hey, quick question. Does anyone have any more coffee?" This level of chaos surfing really requires maximum caffeine. 3 different assistance drones rushed forward with fresh cups. "Perfect," Phoenix beamed, took a long drink, and continued their calculations. "Now, watch this. If you treat each reality plane like a different predator's territory, and the time loop like a really persistent prey animal, what followed was either mathematical genius or complete madness." The audience couldn't quite decide which. Phoenix's solution involved principles from animal behavior, weather prediction, and what they called that thing your brain does when you're trying not to fall off a cliff while also hunting dinner. When they finished presenting their solution with a flourish and a coffee-stained grin, the quantum computing array was still trying to process the first layer of probabilities. But how did you account for the quantum uncertainty principle? Someone in the audience demanded. Phoenix shrugged. "Same way you account for not knowing if that rustle in the bush is dinner or something that wants to make you dinner. You prepare for both possibilities simultaneously and adapt on the fly. Actually, quantum uncertainty is way simpler than surviving a death world. At least quantum particles don't actively try to eat you." The Q3000 finally produced its solution 3 hours later. It was technically more precise than Phoenix's, but also significantly less practical. You see, Phoenix explained to the stunned council, your computers tried to find the perfect solution, but in real-world situations, you know, the kind where being wrong means becoming something's lunch, good enough to survive is better than perfect, but too late. Chairman Zinther's bioluminescence had shifted to a previously undocumented shade of amazed. "I believe we have our winner." The arena erupted in a chaos that would have taken the quantum computers hours to process, but which every biological being present immediately recognized as celebration. "So," Phoenix said, gathering their notebooks and empty coffee cups, about implementing this in the curriculum. "I was thinking we start with teaching computers to think like they're being chased by bears." "Please stop mentioning bears," Professor Clara interrupted, her scales still cycling through various shades of disbelief. "Fine," Phoenix laughed. "How about we start with something simpler, like teaching AI to think like it's trying to predict where a thrown rock will land while running across uneven terrain in the rain, at night, being chased by something with too many teeth, you know, basic stuff." Advisor Dreth made the gesture for simultaneously terrified and impressed. "I believe, Student Blackwood, that you have not only revolutionized our approach to computational theory, but also given us a new appreciation for why humans are classified as death world species." "Nah," Phoenix said, twirling their pencil one last time. I just showed you that sometimes the best computer isn't the one that can calculate everything. It's the one that evolved to calculate just enough to survive, then got really, really good at it through millions of years of trial and error. They paused, then added with a grin, also coffee. Coffee helps a lot. As the celebration continued, several quantum computing specialists could be seen quietly adding survival scenarios and predator-prey dynamics to their research parameters. And in the following days, coffee became the most requested substance in the Institute's fabrication units. The galaxy would never look at computation or humans quite the same way again.